Hello YouTube, this is RainDog308 and I'd like to welcome you to an unscripted look at the personal information management tool landscape. Now I say unscripted because normally when I do a LowEndBox video, I write out a script, I read it, record it, re-record it because I make mistakes, I do all kinds of editing work, and that's fairly typical for, I think, a lot of content producers. But, you know, it takes a lot of work to go through that, and it kind of slows down getting stuff out to you guys. So we're going to try and do one here unscripted. I've got some notes, but I don't have a script to read from. Our topic today is the personal information management landscape. And just to set the stage, what I'm talking about are tools like Obsidian, Notion, Evernote, OneNote, that whole segment of the IT industry. I've looked at this area for a long time because I use these tools heavily. I have a ton of information I need to store and just keep notes on, everything from work to classes, to technical reference information, to just keeping track of all the little bits of information. If you've ever looked at like getting things done, which is a very popular to-do management or task management system, one of the things they talk about in that is that some of the information that comes into you on a daily basis isn't really actionable. It's reference type information or knowledge that you want it in the future. And in the books, they say, make sure you store that somewhere or get a filing cabinet. You know, those books are written back in the 80s, the 90s. So they don't really provide you a method or technique for organizing this information. There's just a sort of box on their chart that says, oh, if you've got reference information, put it in your reference system. Well, just designing and managing that reference system is what we're going to talk about today, because it's not as easy as it looks. Now, maybe you don't have a whole lot of information to keep track of. Maybe you're a student and really most of your stuff is just class notes and you keep them for a semester and then you archive them. For that type of thing, you know, Word docs in a folder might be perfectly fine for you. But if you have more advanced needs, and particularly if you have information that is naturally hierarchical or cross-referenced, that's where I think you'll benefit from some of these applications. So let's dig into them. I'm going to start with my own personal requirements, which probably are not the same as yours. I'm going to try and call out things that meet other requirements, but let me just run through these real quick. First of all, I'm a Apple guy. My home looks like an Apple showroom. So most of my stuff is going to be running on either Mac OS, iPad OS, or iOS, although I do also use Linux quite a bit as well. And I'll call out, and I think all of these products support Windows also, with the exception obviously of Apple Notes, but we'll get into that. For me, it's really critical that things synchronize between the platforms. I want to be able to pull up my phone and see the notes that I edited on my PC or what have you. I want also something that I can back up. I want to feel good about the backups. Really important to me that I never lose this information. So for me, having a backup that I can see and control is really good. It makes me feel a lot more comfortable. Now, for the actual interface itself, I want something that lets me link between notes, because I like to organize things as kind of a wiki, where I start at the same top node, which I call index, at the beginning of whatever session I'm working on, and from there I click down and find what I'm looking for, or you know, obviously I can search too. But for me, that's my primary interface, as opposed to a hierarchical folder-based interface. Well, I'll show you the difference. I like to be able to color text, change fonts, color, you know, the highlighter, all that kind of stuff. And I also like to be able to integrate with other apps via scripting, via API, Apple Script, all those kind of things. So those are things that are important to me. Oh, I also put in tables and images, so I'd like to have some support for that. Now, some things that are not important to me but may be important to you. I don't use Windows, but obviously many people do, so we'll call that out. But I think that's kind of a not a concern here, because all these products support Windows. Linux desktop support is also not something I use. I also do not use a clipper in a browser. A lot of people like this. They like to, let me explain what that is. You go to a website and you say, wow, this has got a lot of good information. I want to save a copy of it. Click on a Clipper plugin or a extension, and it takes a copy of that page, it renders it, and puts it into your notes. Evernote, as I recall, back in the early 2000s, kind of came out with this, and it was very popular. That was kind of their killer feature for a while. I personally just don't use this feature very much. I do copy and paste things, but it's typically code or things that don't need a whole lot of fancy formatting to copy and paste into a Notes app. But I'll call out where we have web browsers available. I use iCloud and Dropbox for my cloud storage. I didn't check out which apps support Google Drive, but I'm going to guess that if something supports Dropbox, it's going to support Google Drive also. And also, I don't do a lot of manual note entry like with the stylus or with the Apple Pencil. So for some people, they really like that. Finally, for me, encrypted storage is not something I worry about because every Mac OS, iPad OS, iOS device, those are already encrypted. They have encrypted storage. And then also, I should also mention, I don't share my notes with a lot of people. I do share a couple with my wife and that kind of thing, but that's not a real key for me. Now, there are people who use these products in a group environment. We use OneNote to share information at my day job. I've talked to many people who use things such as Notion, to share on a team basis. There are other apps that seem more appropriate for a team coming together, right? Confluence would be an example. I don't know anybody who's using Confluence for their own personal notes, but a lot of teams use it for team documentation and that kind of thing. So this video isn't really aimed at group sharing when we're talking here. All right, so let's get into these notes, and I'm going to go from least favorite to most favorite, and the one that I'm actually using. And I'm going to start at the least favorite, and it really kind of breaks my heart. I'm going to start with Evernote. Evernote, I started with it, I want to say like 2002, 2003. I have a t-shirt, I have an Evernote t-shirt, and I got some swag, some stickers. I saw them at a conference at some point like 2004, 2005. They had a booth and I was there. Early on, this was a fantastic product. And it's kind of an interesting product. The way it works is that you've got the desktop interface and there's also a web interface, but they're both backed by this service in the cloud. And that's a little bit different than many of these applications because Evernote has, when they came out, they had the API integration, which was kind of new in this space. So kind of cool product. They have a great web clipper. Unfortunately for me, that's kind of where the pluses start. My experience is that I've used Evernote several different periods. Once in the early 2000s, once I think about maybe 10 years ago, then I tried it maybe 5 years ago. Each time, it's just been a buggy mess. I'm sorry to say it. Again, I was a believer. I still sometimes get notifications on YouTube from Evernote channels I subscribed to years ago. But it's just a buggy mess. And I would find things like, I would apply some formatting on my phone. It wouldn't show up on the desktop. I'd change something on the desktop. It would trash the formatting on the phone. Sometimes things wouldn't save or stick, or I'd get errors. And this is not me. I see these things in the Evernote forums. Also, I don't think the company is entirely in a good space. They've had a lot of turnover. I think the founder left. They've got a new guy in there now. They tried to go enterprise. I don't think it worked. They made some acquisitions. They bought a company called Stitch or Sketch, something like that, some kind of a drawing application. They bought it and 2 years later threw it away. I mean, it's just doesn't seem to be a really well-run company to me. But, early on, they were the king. They were really pioneers in this space. And in fact, OneNote, which we'll talk about here shortly, was originally kind of a competitor to Evernote, and then over time there's been kind of interface idea sharing between them. But Evernote's had a number of reboots also. Early on, when I first used Evernote, one of the things I liked was, I can create folders within folders within folders, and I can organize my stuff however I want. It's great. Then they came along and said, no, we're not going to let you do that anymore. You can have a folder and a subfolder, and that's it. But you can use tags. Well, tags are a great solution for some folks, but did not meet everyone's needs. So about a third of their users were always in the forums screaming and yelling and stomping their fists and saying, we want, infinite folders back and all this kind of stuff. Then they did a reboot 5-10 years ago, maybe. I don't remember the time. Where, I used to go into the web interface and it looked just like the desktop interface. It was really kind of cool. In fact, for some people, they said, I just use the web interface. Well, they got rid of that and they went to this very white, spacey, low information presentation on the web, which it just was not very popular. And again, about a third of the people hated it and started stomping their feet. Again, if you're just using Evernote as kind of you're kind of a light user, you're just dumping text into it, it's convenient, you don't drive it too hard, it'd probably work for you. But I think there are better choices out there in 2022. Also, Evernote is fairly expensive. I recall it was something like around $7 or $8 a month. There's a discount if you pay for a year or whatever. But, for that kind of price, there are, just to make a comparison, let's say it is $8 a month, and I apologize. I should have done some research and look. But, that's about $100 a year. For that price, you're competing with Microsoft. And with Microsoft, you're getting Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, and OneNote for the same price. So it just doesn't seem like it's a solid product just from a marketing perspective. So I'm going to say no to Evernote. They are one of the leaders. I love them. I appreciate the pioneering they did, but I think the industry has moved on. Now, let's move on to the next one, which is Notion. That's my second least favorite of these. Let me say two really, really positive things about Notion. First of all, the interface is unbelievably pleasant. It's like Steve Jobs was, raised from the dead and came back to design this thing. It really is a very nice interface. You can put graphics on it. Just by default, when you start a new note or a new, I forget what the organization is. I think they should call it a folder or category, whatever. They put some art there based on, just to take a guess. Hey, here's some art that would look nice as a background. You can change it, of course, but I mean, just that kind of thing is really, really nice. And they've obviously put a lot of work into selecting fonts, and it really has that kind of Apple polish to it. Very, very nice interface. And the second big plus that I think is super cool is these database types that they've got. Now, let's say you go out and you find some information on the web. Let's say it's a list of, teams that have won the Super Bowl. So you highlight that table and copy it, and then you paste it into Notion. What Notion will do is it will take those rows of the table and make them rows in this kind of little mini database, a little mini embedded database. And the cool thing is that it actually acts like a database. So you can query it, you can summarize on it, you can do some, it's not Oracle obviously embedded, but you can do a lot of cool things with it. And then there's templating, and there are whole courses on YouTube how to exploit this. So the cool thing is that it's different than everybody else in the industry. Right? I don't know another product that quite has this, and it's really a standout feature. I had fun just playing with this feature alone. In fact, when I first started playing with Notion, I thought, wow, this is beautiful to look at, and oh wow, these databases are really cool. I was falling in love until there is one part of Notion that completely knocks it out for me, and that is that it is 100% lock-in to a proprietary service, a proprietary format. There's no easy migration strategy if you want to switch, and that to me killed it. I mean, it's free, so I could certainly imagine using this in some environments where the data isn't as critical to me, right? So for example, if my employer said, we've decided to use Notion, you're going to use Notion, that would be great. I would be happy to use it, because they're taking the responsibility for, is Notion going to be around in 10 years? Is Notion going to, trap their data? Is Notion going to steal their data? I'm not saying that they would, but I'm saying it's a risk in these kind of cloud solutions. So if someone else is making that call and taking the risk, I'd be fine using the product because I really think it is a nice product. But when it's my data, and I just can't go there. And just to enumerate, I listed the risks, but just to think about them for a moment, the issue with the lock-in is that Notion could go out of business. Notion could be bought by somebody who takes a very different point of view. Notion could have a very serious security incident where they're hacked or something, which might make me say, oh, I want to get my data out of there. But when I created some data in Notion, and then I tried to move it out, and really the only way to do it that I found was to copy paste, right? You copy it here and paste it over there. And unfortunately, those beautiful databases do not copy and paste very well. There may be more sophisticated exporters that are out there. I didn't look. But for me, the lock-in and the proprietary format just made it unacceptable. And again, also, you've got your data out in the cloud. I'm okay with that to some extent for synchronizing, Dropbox or something like that. But when it's in a small company, a proprietary format, I have no idea what they're doing with it. It just, I don't know. It bothers me. So a Notion, unfortunately, I had to strike off my list. Well, let's go on to the next one, and this is OneNote. Now, OneNote, you probably know, if you've used Office in the last 20 years, Microsoft Office, you probably know OneNote. It was originally made as an Evernote killer, and it's kind of interesting because it's a different philosophy. With Evernote, you were interacting with a web API, and both the web application, your client applications, your PC, etc., those were all synchronizing with that web API. With OneNote, it's more of a file, right? All the information is stored in your local file. And then that file, it can be synchronized with the web, but you're never going to write code that says, hey, go call this OneNote API to create a section and put this note in it, right? You can't do that in the cloud. There probably is a way of doing it locally, of course, I'm sure with C# or whatever the current macro language is for Office. It's not Visual Basic for apps anymore, but whatever that is, I'm sure you could do it. You can probably do it with PowerShell or something like that. But you're modifying all the stuff locally. You're not interacting with a service or an API in the cloud. It's a small distinction for most people. It probably doesn't matter. I'm just calling it out. It's a different implementation path that Microsoft took. The other thing is that when, interestingly enough, when OneNote first came out, they did not have a really strong clipper. I'm talking like 2003, 2004. And then and for a while, Evernote, that was kind of their what they hung their hat on. It's like, hey, we have the best web clipper. OneNote has since caught up. And in fact, I think that technology is a little bit passé, because personally, whenever I have saved a PDF version of a website or saved a web archive or printed to a PDF or whatever, it's generally been pretty solid. And that definitely was not true in 2003. And it's not 100% across the board. But in 2022, I feel pretty confident that if I absolutely had to save a PDF of a web page or something like that to do that kind of Clipper-like functionality, it would work just fine. So I don't know that that is a big differentiator anymore. All right, let's go. I'm sorry, we're getting off topic here. That's the problem when you don't have a script. So let's go back into OneNote. So OneNote, you probably are familiar with the interface. You create sections. Within sections, you create, you start with notebooks, and then with notebooks, you have sections, and with sections, you have pages. Within those pages, there's great support for images, tables, fonts, colors, highlights, all that kind of stuff. Also good support if you're working on like a Microsoft Surface with a stylus. There's a lot of things you can do. And that brings me to a key point here. Remember when I said that I'm mostly an Apple guy? If I was a hardcore Windows guy and I was writing C# and PowerShell and doing everything on Windows, this would probably be a lot more attractive to me. Although there are a couple things I'll call out that I don't really like. One thing is that doing internote linking is awful. And we're going to see this again with Apple Notes. The way it works is that you need to copy a link to the note. And that really is for purposes of sharing it. So if I had a note and I want to say, hey, Bob, I'm going to send you a link to this note so you can see it, I could send Bob that link. He clicks on it, and it comes up in the web service. I don't know if it would work on his local app, but essentially that's what these internote linking is all about in the OneNote world. But again, when you create that link, it's just a little bit clunky to start with. You've got to have internet access to create the link, and you have to have internet access to later follow that link. So if you have got your notes and you happen to be in a train going through a tunnel, all right, tunnels aren't that long, but if you're out in the wild somewhere, you don't have good internet access, you're not going to be following any of those links or editing your notes to create links. It's kind of it's a hack. How much that bothers you depends on, I guess, what your work patterns are. But certainly, I think if I was on a 6-hour plane ride, I'd be a little bit frustrated I couldn't get to my stuff. The second thing, of course, is this has the Office price tag, right? We're talking about $99 a year. I would say that if OneNote is the only reason you're buying an Office 365 subscription, there are probably other products you could use. On the other hand, flip that around. If you've already say, hey, I need Word, I need PowerPoint, I need Excel, I'm going to get OneNote for free, maybe it makes sense for you, right? I will say, I mentioned the web app, the Office Live, or whatever they call it now, the web version of OneNote is excellent. So I think, I have to think about this, I think you probably could use OneNote mostly for free if you were happy with the web version, because I think you can subscribe to Office 365, or not subscribe to it, you can create a Microsoft account, which would allow you to use OneNote online. Don't quote me on that. If you know for sure, put it in the comments below, but that is a nice feature, which most of these products don't have. Notion does. They also have a web, and I guess Evernote does also, where you can access your stuff on the web. So if you're at the library and you don't have a computer with you, you don't have your phone, okay, it's probably not the most common scenario, but you could log in and look at your stuff. So the thing that really bugs me about OneNote, two major knockouts, or three, I guess. One is, it's kind of feature stripped for Mac OS. Actually, I think that the iPad version is probably closer to what Microsoft feels is the appropriate, or their vision for a mobile app, than the Mac OS desktop is for a desktop app, right, if that makes sense. So that's one thing. Another thing is I don't like the internote linking. And the third thing is just the structure of it. It is a very hierarchical system, right? It works great if your information naturally sorts itself into fairly shallow 3-tier information. By that I mean, if your information can be organized well with a notebook, section, and page, maybe this is the product for you. I don't mean, well, actually I only want to have 2 levels, or I want to have 4 levels. Not an option. You have 3 levels and that's it. You've got notebook, section, page, and that's where you organize your stuff. So when I say, notebook, section, page, another part of this is the pages themselves are not, they're not organized in a really helpful way. It's just a list of pages. So that's fine. If you've got 4 or 5 pages, you can just look and say, oh, I want to edit or view page number, the third one in the list there. But if you've got like 30 or 40, you're going to be scrolling up and down. Now, you can sort them by name or last modified, but inevitably it just doesn't match up with what you want. And so sorting through, finding your notes, you're either going to be searching or doing a lot of visual scanning. I just find the interface limiting personally. So those are the 3 reasons I'm not a big fan of OneNote. There also is a proprietary lock in there that's pretty intense. With Evernote, people did develop exporters, and I think, I'm trying to remember, I believe I've read that you can export from OneNote to Evernote, and then from Evernote use one of those exporters to get it out as some format you could export somewhere else, but I'm pretty sure that's going to trash any kind of formatting or whatever that you got running through all that. So, all right, let's jump from Redmond. We'll go down to Cupertino and talk about Apple Notes. Now, if you're not an Apple user, if you don't own a single Apple product, this part doesn't apply to you. Although, I believe you could actually still use it, because you could create an Apple account, which would allow you to log into iCloud.com, and there you could use the web version of Apple Notes to look at your stuff. But I would say the web version is incredibly limited, so that'd be my first strike against Apple Notes, is that the web version. I honestly don't understand what their purpose or intent was with that, because it's so limited that I can't imagine anybody really uses it. So why bother writing it? Anyway, let's start from the top here. So, it's Apple, so obviously you've got it on all your Apple devices, and it does have very deep OS integration. So it's going to be supported by the OS, by Apple Script, shortcuts, all that kind of stuff. Very easy to write scripts to create notes, modify notes, however you want. I would also say, and I didn't really touch on this as much in the other ones, but if you want to think about if something is future-proof, in other words, what are the odds that the maker is going to go away? I feel pretty good that OneNote's going to be around. There are literally hundreds of millions of OneNote users, and I don't think Microsoft is going to turn their back on that population anytime soon. Likewise, Apple Notes, I think that's in for the long haul. Unless you think either Microsoft or Apple is going to go out of business anytime soon, I think these are fairly safe bets from that perspective. It is a proprietary format, so that's kind of a negative. And again, I talked about internote linking in OneNote. It's the same ugly hack in Apple Notes. You share the note, so you copy the link, and then you paste it into another note. But again, only works when you have internet to create or follow those links. Now it's Apple, so as you can imagine, it's got great support for images and tables and highlights and all that kind of stuff. You can make your notes look however you want, but that's on the client apps. I don't know if all that carries over to the web. And really, we should just stop talking about the web, or I should, because it's such a useless interface. This is a free product if you buy Apple device. So for me, it's free because I've already made the investment. I would not buy an Apple product just so you can use Apple Notes, but depending on where you are, it can be useful. I'm going to guess that there's an awful lot of people who use Notes because they have an iPhone, they want to store something, they've got like 3 or 4 notes, and that's the end of their Apple Note usage. Maybe there are students who really get into this thing and put a ton of stuff in there. If you watch Apple's keynotes or their presentations, they would certainly make that case. Now, there are some really sophisticated things you can do with Apple Notes around creating smart folders, where you put a note there and it does a variety of whatever actions you set up for it. And again, with shortcuts, you can write very complex logic to manipulate your notes. And by the way, if you haven't played with shortcuts, I would. It's a fun product. Even if your only Apple device is an iPhone, you can do a lot with shortcuts. I mean, I've got all kinds of little icons on my main iPhone screen where I tap them and they fire off, and do 6 or 7 things automatically. So cool stuff. But anyway, Apple Notes, in my experience, is like a lot of the Apple OS products. I would compare it to Reminders. Reminders works great if you have basic or medium needs. If you have complex needs where you want something like, Omni Planner, that's not it. OmniFocus, that's the one. Or some of the more sophisticated to-do management, then obviously Apple's not going to be able to meet that need because they make their products for prosumer type users, right? People who are a bit more sophisticated, but they also make their products for just the average Joe. So if you are a more sophisticated user, I think you could easily outgrow Apple Notes. The final thing I would say about Apple Notes that drives me a little bit nuts is the interface. Again, I've got my my list of folders, and then in those folders I can create notes, and that's about it. And inevitably, I find myself searching for something, scrolling up and down that list, sorting it, resorting it. It's just kind of a pain to find things in Apple Notes. So not one that I went with. I still use it lightly just because it's in the OS and sometimes it's the easiest thing to use, but not a serious competitor. So right now we've knocked out Evernote, Notion, OneNote, and I've got 2 more products coming up, but let me talk about some that didn't make the list before we get into the silver and gold finalists here. Bear Notes is one. I just didn't see anything in Bear Notes that looked like I wouldn't get it elsewhere. It's not super expensive. I think it's like $15 a year. It's markdown based. I think it has a generally positive reputation. It might be worth looking for. VimWiki, that's one. It is essentially using Vim, the VI editor, improved as a wiki. Cool thing, but does not support mobile. Org Mode from Emacs. Now we're getting pretty obscure here. If you're an Emacs user, you probably already know about Org Mode. If you're not an Emacs user, you're not likely to become one. So I will set that one aside, but I will note there is actually a mobile app for that. There are many, many others of these products. But right now we're going to go on to 2 products that I think really deserve your consideration. And the first is Joplin. Joplin, which has a really cool name, by the way, is a free and open source product. You can find the source on GitHub. It's under an MIT license. So you're absolutely protected from any future lock-in. There is optional cloud, I think it's a cloud sync service, or maybe it's a storage service, I don't know. That's run by the Joplin project as kind of a moneymaker for them. But you don't have to use that. I used it over Dropbox. It worked just fine. So, and I'm sure it supports other cloud storage. Now, Joplin is a Markdown-based product. So when you're working in the product, you're entering in Markdown codes to style the text. And those are pretty intuitive. You know, if I'm going to, it's things like putting text in surrounded by asterisks or underlines or things like that to style your text, using a couple of octothorpes at the start of a line to make it a header, or one is a H1, two is an H2. It's very intuitive, and in fact, I think if anyone just takes a look at a Markdown reference sheet, you'll understand it pretty easily. So there's good and bad with Markdown. Now, it's cool because once you've entered your stuff in Markdown, you can many products will accept Markdown. For example, if you're doing blogging, you could write up your article in Joplin in Markdown and then copy paste that into different blogging software that takes your Markdown as input. It is the negative to Markdown is that some things are much more difficult. Tables, for example, you're generally entering it. It's like entering HTML, right? You're marking it up. So it's not that you're, for example, in OneNote or Apple Note, you can create a table and you're just tabbing through the fields and entering stuff and hitting return at the end of a row, and it's very easy to use. With Markdown, you're going to be saying, this is the header row, here's some special characters to mark each field, here's the individual cells. It's certainly doable, and if you're a person who tends to write notes once and then refer to them many times, paying that formatting price, if you will, is no doubt worth it. But for light users, that's kind of a little bit of a barrier. Likewise, images, with Joplin and with Obsidian, which by the way is our next product, when you paste in an image, it stores it as like a UUID type named file, and then it inserts a link to that file name. That works, but you end up with notes that have weird names like a UUID.jpg or whatever, .png. So it works fine for copy and pasting in images. I do it all the time, but it can lead to kind of a cluttered note space. Now, I want to touch on something that is really interesting here. I've talked a number of times about internote linking. Now, with both Joplin and Obsidian, they have solved an interesting problem two different ways. So the problem is, if I make a link to a note and then later I rename the note that's linked to, my link will break, as you might expect. It's no different than if I rename a web page, anyone who linked to that web page is going to have a broken link. Well, with Joplin, what they do is the copy, when you copy it, you actually are pasting in a UUID type link. So you're not linking to my class notes, you're linking to a string of numbers. That string of numbers is never going to change. And so your links don't break if you rename a note, because your link isn't based on the name of that note. Now this is really interesting, and we'll talk about this when we get to Obsidian, because they solve it in a completely different way. There's some advantages to this method, mainly that it allows you a lot of freedom in the names of your notes because you're not using them as a title. It's just another piece of information. It'll make more sense when I show you how Obsidian does it. But needless to say, you can do internote linking in Joplin. I would say it's not as easy on the fly as it is in Obsidian, because you've got to do that copy paste thing, but there's no internet required. You're not, linking, you don't have to go out to some cloud service to get a link and then when you follow it, etc. Now, the interface in Joplin is very OneNote-ish, which is kind of interesting because Joplin was designed as an Evernote replacement, but Evernote has taken on kind of a OneNote-ish, or maybe OneNote took on a Evernote. There's so much incestuous information or idea sharing between these products. So it is a much more hierarchical solution. However, there's a key difference. remember when I talked about OneNote, I said everything's going to be at the third level, right? You've got notebook, section, page. Well, with Joplin, you've got notebooks, and you create, and then in those you can create sub-notebooks. But then within those you can create sub-notebooks, and then notebooks within those, and notebooks, so it's infinite, right? Whatever depth you want. That's kind of cool, right? I still get the sense that a really deep tree, 16 levels deep, that probably isn't what's envisioned. I believe the software can do it, but for example, there's no keyboard shortcut for creating a subfolder, or at least it wasn't intuitive to me. It certainly works, but it just kind of gives you a sense of, well, the designers are giving you the freedom, but they're not expecting you to create, this huge file system of your notes. And I believe I saw that subfolder creation is not available on the mobile app. You can use subfolders, but you can't create them on mobile. And that's a feature request that's been out there for a while, so I'm not sure what the hang up is. So you can use tags also to organize your stuff. So really you have the hierarchical method. You can do internote linking. You can use tags. So really however you want to organize things you can. I should have mentioned also Apple Notes, and I think OneNote also supports tags. Because it's Markdown, the changing of texts, fonts, highlights, not nearly as feature complete as Apple Notes or OneNote or one of those products. You can highlight, you can bold, but it is a text-based application. So to my knowledge, I could be wrong on this, but I don't think you could say, I want to put this in Courier or this in Times New Roman or something like that. And there is a browser clipper, I believe, but I haven't used it. Anyway, Joplin is a really cool project. I like the fact that it's free and open source, right? You are completely safe in terms of future being future-proofed. And because it is, you're kind of controlling how you set it up, you are in control of how you want to do your syncing, your storage, all that kind of stuff. So I would absolutely recommend Joplin if you like the interface. If you don't, then I have another product for you. But if someone said to me, oh yeah, I've been using Joplin, I've got all my stuff in there, I'd say, all right, that's a good choice. So that's my recommendation. My silver recommendation, but let's go on to the gold now, and that is a product called Obsidian. Now, Obsidian, to be honest, once I saw they had a Vim mode, they had me. And it's really cool because you go to turn it on in the settings, and it says, are you sure you understand this? Please enter this VI command to acknowledge that you understand what you're doing. This is absolutely the most geeky of all these products, right? You can get pretty darn nerdy with this system. Again, it's another Markdown-based editor, so you get all the pros and cons that I mentioned with Joplin. Very big, Obsidian, the community, is very big on, or the developers are very big on putting you in control of your data. So do you want to keep your stuff on a thumb drive? You can do it. Do you want to keep it on Dropbox? You can do that. They do have a synchronization storage service, but I believe it's just sync. I didn't really look into it. So very big part of their ethos is you're in control of your data. Although, to be fair, I think you can do the same thing with Joplin. Now, if you go and look at your file system wherever you decide to keep your Obsidian vault, as they call it, you're going to find just directories and .md markdown files. There's no binary files or indexes or mysterious files. So it's very open and lock-in proof, and it makes it incredibly easy to script with, right? Because you're just modifying text files. So for you guys who are, Unix heads who like to work with Perl and Python and shell scripts, this is your product. In fact, if you just go into, if you write a script or some code that creates a .md file in one of those Obsidian directories in your vault, it automatically shows up in your notes virtually instantly. So for example, if you've got something that, every day you get a report, you could have it drop into a folder in your Obsidian vault. Next time you open Obsidian, there it is to read and consume. And of course, you could go even further by having a page of links to those, etc. However you want to do it. So definitely very hackable, very fun to play with. Let's see here. So I want to talk about a couple interesting things about Obsidian. Remember I mentioned internote linking with Joplin. Well, with Obsidian, they've taken a totally different solution. With Joplin, you copy and paste, and when you paste, you actually get this UUID type thing. With Joplin, it's very much like editing Wikipedia. You just hit your open brackets, put in the name of the page, close brackets, and then it's like you created a wiki page. Now you click on that, and there's your page. So if you've got another page, open brackets, start typing, it will prompt you to autocomplete, but you just type the name of the page. Well, what if you rename that page? Well, that's cool, because what Obsidian does is the moment you hit, save or commit or whatever it is, it goes through all of your notes and finds the links and changes them for you. In fact, you can turn on this thing, they'll give you little messages. So I changed 16 files. Now, I don't know how well that scales. I've got, several hundred notes that are all interlinked. I've not had a problem. I mean, it's instant. But that's on a fairly new system I'm working on. I imagine if you had tens of thousands of notes and you're working on a really old box, it may take a little bit of time to chug through all that. But for, I think, typical users, just assume it's instant. So that's a cool choice. Again, the same problem, two different projects, chose two different paths to solve it. And there's a trade-off, just like there was with Joplin. The trade-off is, the benefit is that in the Obsidian model, it's really easy to put in a link to a page. You don't have to go and copy and paste it. You just, open brackets, type in the name of the page, close brackets, and of course something pops up so you can just click on it or tab complete it. So adding links to pages is incredibly easy. On the other hand, that means that your page names are really, really important. So if you name a page notes or info or something like that, it's going to be hard to think about that, find it, etc. If you name it something like biology notes, there's so many different things that could link to that, and what it drives you to do is to name things like biology notes 2022-04-05 or something like that, right? Because you want to be able to link to individual notes. And so I'm probably not explaining it well, but in my experience at least, because the name of the note is also going to be the link, and it's also going to be kind of the unique identifier for that note, you have to put a little bit more thought into how you name your notes. Again, you can rename them and restructure at any time, because Obsidian will do all the cleanup for you. But if you're going to have notes for a bunch of scripts that you're going to write, you're probably going to want to call them something like script and then the name of the script or something, rather than just the name of the files, because otherwise when you look at your notes, you're not sure which one goes to which, right? And that's another key point, is that Obsidian by default is not hierarchical. It can be. You can create as many folders, subfolders, whatever you want, or you can keep all your notes in one long list. Now, this brings me to my second key point about Obsidian, is that often it can be kind of a steep learning curve for new users. I've heard that comment just watching YouTube videos and stuff. And that's because it gives you so many things. That toolbox is so full that when you open it up, you're like, whoa, what do I want to do with all this stuff? Do I want to have a highly structured layout with folders and subfolders? Obsidian can do that. Or do you want 0 folders? Have all of your notes in one long list, and then you're using kind of a wiki style to organize them? Sure, you can do that. Or do you want to organize things with tags? Now, I don't think any of my notes have a tag in it, because I prefer a real top-down wiki approach. But some people love tags, and of course you can search with tags, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, there's 3 different ways of working with Obsidian. That's just kind of things I jotted down here in my notes. There are many more. So it can be a little bit intimidating to say, whoa, how am I going to organize all this kind of stuff? With OneNote or Apple Notes or some of those products, you're forced into what the developer wants you to do with your notes. Obsidian, it's much more freeform. Let's see here. What else did I note about Obsidian? There is an intensely passionate community. People love this product. If you're an Obsidian user and you get into it, the community is there to do just about anything you want, because there are a galaxy of plugins. Now, I didn't look to see if Joplin has this also, but at least for Obsidian, in fact, I watched a video by a guy. I'll give a shout out. I think his name is Sergio. Great channel. He does a channel on Obsidian. Here, while I'm doing this program, I will find the name of the guy so I can give it to you. But he has a course on Obsidian. I believe his name is Sergio. Here, I'll see if I can get a link in there for you. Sergio. From Sergio. Oh, shout out to his channel. It's a new channel, so good to get in on the ground floor. But one of the things he points out, I think he has a whole video on this, where he says, do not use plugins. Don't, at least to start, right? Don't sit down in Obsidian and say, oh, wow, there's hundreds of plugins. I'm going to use this one and this one and this one and this one. And suddenly you've got this galaxy of stuff that you're not really sure how it interacts, right? There are core plugins, and then there's open community plugins. And so obviously there's the core ones are certified, are not going to break anything. The community ones a little bit more, Wild West. Also, Obsidian supports templates, and you can get completely overboard on templates because there's billions of templates out there, right? So again, it is this universe that you step into, and it can be a bit intimidating. I would say just start using the product without turning anything on, without adding any plugins, any templates. And then as you find something you want to do, like, this isn't quite meeting my needs, go find a plugin, and it exists. They also have an interesting support model. You can sign up for Obsidian Catalyst, which allows you to give money to the developers, etc. It gives you early access and some other perks. It's kind of a Patreon model. They do have a synchronization service if you want. And that is another source of revenue for them. However, to be honest, I keep my stuff on Dropbox, not having any issues. So that's Obsidian. Very interesting product. I've really been enjoying it. I have moved virtually everything into Obsidian other than some old legacy stuff I've still got in various products that I should move one of these days. But for the last 6 weeks or so, I've pretty much lived my life in Obsidian for reference information. I don't do to-dos in there. I don't do my calendar in there. I don't keep databases of stuff in there. But for my reference information, which for me really is a private wiki. That's when I say reference, that's what I'm referring to. From that, all of that is in OneNote. OneNote. It's in Obsidian today. So that's my look at these various personal information management tools. Now, I mentioned some other ones which I haven't looked at, and I'm sure there are more out there. So is there something that you're using? Would love to have a conversation with you in the comments below to hear about. First of all, if I'm wrong about anything, absolutely put that in there. Usually we don't have to remind people to do that. But if I'm wrong about anything, if you have a different take, if you've got a different tool, or if you just want to agree, please let us know down below. And if this is your first time on our channel, I'd like to welcome you to visit us at LowEndBox or LowEndTalk, where we've got just tons of great content. We've got, first of all, the best offers on the planet for cheap hosting, cheap VPS, dedicated servers, etc. If you're looking for hosting, you need to come to us first to find out what you should be paying. Second of all, we've got I think I counted like over 250 tutorials. We've got interviews, really good stuff with industry leaders. You'll learn a lot just reading our site. And of course, our sister site, LowEndTalk, we've got just a very spirited discussion, a lot, even more offers. So if you're interested in hosting, technology, saving money, please come visit us at LowEndBox and LowEndTalk. Until next time, happy hosting.